The remarkable saga of Jacob, the man who wrestled with God, is a fascinating story that remains one of the great stories of the Bible. The story is not only a chronicle of a life full of challenges, delusions, and personal searches, but also a deep story. In the dim light of the night, he faced not only a physical opponent, but the very essence of his soul. Support by subscribing, and don't forget to turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our next videos. The first mention of Jacob in the Bible is in Genesis 25, when Rebekah, Jacob's mother, was pregnant with him and his twin brother. Esau asked God why she had two children. God replied that the enmity between the two brothers was a foreshadowing of the two nations, and that according to Genesis 36, Jacob would be the forefather of Israel, and Esau of Edom would be the forefather of Israel, and the older brother Esau would become a servant, Jacob's. Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Nahlam, who was 40 years old at that time. Ran, the sister of Isaac of Aramean, prayed to God for her wife because she was barren, and God answered her prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant, and the child was thrust into her, and she said, "Why this happened to me?" She went to consult the Lord, and the Lord told her that there are two nations in your life, and the two nations will be separated in you, and one nation will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Yes, when she gave birth, she had twins inside her. The first that came out was red, and his whole body was like shaggy cloth. Therefore he was called Esau. And because his brother came out, his hand took hold of Esau's heel. Therefore he was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old. When Rebekah's children grew up, and Esau became a skilled hunter and man of the wilderness, while Jacob preferred to stay at home in the tent, just as Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah had loved Jacob when Jacob cooked. Esau was soaked and came back from the field hungry and told Jacob, "Come on, give me the red stew." I was hungry, so he was also called Edom. Genesis 32:24-29. Jacob's character is described in the Bible as associated with deceit and deception from his birth to his struggle with God. Jacob's infamous deception was against his twin brother Esau in exchange for his birthright as the eldest son, double the amount of his father, Isaac's inheritance. According to Genesis 25:29-34, Jacob gave his hungry brother a bowl of soup while he was cooking. Stew Esau came back from the clearing, and he was hungry. And he said to Jacob, "Hurry and let me eat red stew, I am hungry." So he also called Edom, and Jacob replied with, "First I will sell your birthright." Esau said, "Look, I will die. Jacob gave me the birthright, but Jacob first swore to me. So he swore to him and sold the birthright to Jacob. So Jacob gave each of Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and so on. Arose and departed, so that Esau despised his birthright. According to Genesis 27:1-29, Esau was eligible for the blessing. "Son, I'm here." He answered and said, Isaac said, "Now I am old, and I do not know when I shall die. Now grab your tools, quiver and bow, and head out to hunt me down some wild animals. Make me a delicious meal that I would love to eat. Give it to me, and let me bless you before I die." Now Rebekah listens and Isaac listens. When Esau went hunting and brought him back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring me some game and serve it to me before you die.' I can bless you, Lord. Now my son must listen carefully and do as I say, Father, so that he can give it to you." Jacob said to his mother Rebekah before his death, "You are a blessing to me, but my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I have smooth skin. And if my father touches me, I will appear to disappoint him, to bring a curse on me instead of blessing your mother." I told him, "My son, let the curse fall on me, and do as I say. Go and bring them to me." So he went and took and brought them. The father liked it. So Rebekah took her eldest son, Esau's best clothes, When she got home, she put them on her youngest son Jacob, and covered his hands and the flat part of his neck with a goat skin, and then she gave her son Jacob delicious food and bread that she had made. And he went to him. "Father," and my father said, "Yes, my son." He answered, "Who is?" Jacob said to your father, "I am Esau, your firstborn son. I did what you told me. Sit down and eat my game so you can give me your blessing." Isaac asked your son, "How did you find my son so quickly?" "The Lord, your God, gave me success," he answered. Then Isaac said, Then his father Isaac drank wine and said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." Then he came to him and kissed him, and when Isaac smelled his scent and blessed his clothes, he said, "Oh, your smell! The son is like the fragrance of the field, blessed by the Lord. May God give you the right from heaven, and give the earth wealth, abundant grain, and new wine. May all nations serve you, brother Lord. Your mother's descendants bow down to you. Your mother's descendants bow down to you." This made Esau want to kill his brother, so Jacob fled back to his mother's homeland, where he saw an angel and a stairway to heaven. And when Jacob reached Haran, he met his match, his uncle Laban. Genesis 29. Then Jacob went on his way, and came to the land of the people of the east, near Haran, and saw a well in the field. And by the well were 3 flocks of sheep, for the sheep were drinking from the well, on top of which was a large stone. The shepherd rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well, gave the sheep water, and then put the stone back in its place above the mouth of the well. James asked them, "Brothers, where are you from?" They said, "We were from Haran." So he asked, "If you know Ramah, son of Nahor, brother of Abraham?" And they said, "We know him." He asked if everything is okay. They said he was fine. "Look, your daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep." Jacob said, "Look, the sun is still high in the sky, and it is not too early to gather the flock. It was time to water the sheep in the evening, and then go and put them back in the pasture. But they said we couldn't until all the sheep were gathered, and the shepherds removed the stone from the mouth of the well, and then we could water the sheep while they were drinking water." Rachel came with her father's sheep because she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his uncle Reem, and his flock, he went and wished for a stone from the mouth of the well, and gave water to his uncle Reem's flock. He lifted up his voice and wept, and Jacob told Rachel that he was related to her father, Rebekah's son. And she ran to tell her father, and when Laban heard that his sister's son Jacob had come, he ran to meet him, hugged him. "Tell Jacob, just because you are my relative, you have to work for me for free. Tell me what your salary should be." Now Ran has 2 daughters, the older named Leah and the younger Rachel. So he said that in exchange for the privilege of marrying Rachel, his youngest daughter Lan said that it would be better if I married her to you than to make another man stay and work for me. So Jacob served Lan for 7 years. Get the right to marry Raquel, but it seems they only have one. Out of love for her, he stayed for a few days, and finally Jacob told Lan to give me my wife when my time was up, so I could take her as my wife, and then Lan packed up. The man was preparing a wedding feast. "What? I'm useless. You worked for Raquel for 7 years. Why did you lie to me and treat me like that?" But Lan just said, "It's not our custom here to marry the youngest daughter first, and let the oldest daughter finish the wedding week with Leah. So we also give it for you, Rachel. In return, you have to work for me for many more years." So Jacob went along and completed the week of Leah's wedding. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his second wife, and Laban also gave his maidservant. Bhah gave her daughter Rachel as a servant so that Jacob could complete his wedding. As his wife, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and despite his feelings for Laban's younger daughter Rachel, he served Laban for another 7 years. Jacob was tricked into marrying his sister Leah. However, Jacob persevered and eventually married the man of his heart. Jacob worked for Laban for many years. Thanks to God's protection and Jacob's own family, Jacob was able to capture most of Laban's herd. The question is, this means that Jacob will have to face Esau if his brother's anger remains unsatisfied after all these years. He would not only be a great nation, but a nation full of fear and anxiety. And Jacob was about to meet his brother Esau, who, at a critical moment in his life, had resolved to kill him. All efforts and fears will soon come true. Jacob flees from angry Laban. To appease his brother Esau, Jacob invented bribery and then took his wife and children to send a caravan of gifts across the Jabbok River in hopes of appeasing his brother. But he was stripped of all his material wealth as he was left alone in an exhausted world. Desert, with death in his eyes, in fact, unable to control his destiny, he fell into a deep sleep on the bank of the Jabbok River, his father-in-law behind him and Esau in front, exhausted and incapacitated. To fight. But just then, his real struggle begins with escaping his family history, and facing God is hard enough. The night Jacob is visited by a strange angel is something else entirely. And Jacob arose in the night, and took his two wives, his maidservants, and his 11 sons, and went to the flocks of the river Jabbok. And after he had sent them over the river, he sent all his possessions. Then Jacob was left alone, and he fought until dawn. Jacob fought from the moment of his birth. He was in the conflict with Esau. He later clashed with Ram, but just before meeting Esau, Jacob went through the most difficult phase of his life. He once clung to his brother's heel, and now he clung to the body of God himself. When the man saw that he could not subdue him, he touched Jacob's hip, which was bent in the fight, and the man said to me to go, because it is daylight. But Jacob answered, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man answered and said, Thy name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for thou hast fought and prevailed against God. And the man Jacob asked him to tell me thy name. But he answered, Why didst thou ask my name? So he blessed him there, and he placed Jacob's pineal gland, and said, It was because I met God face to face, but my life was spared. And when he passed through the pineal gland, the sun rose on him, and he limped because of his hip. So to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendons attached to the pineal gland. Since Jacob's hip joint was touched near the tendon, note that Jacob was 79 years old at this point in the narrative, so it is unlikely that he physically challenged the angel, although there is no reason to doubt that a physical challenge occurred when Jacob's opponent was incapable. When we defeated him, we should not confuse it with the main thing, which is not that Jacob physically dominated the man, but the ease with which he physically harmed him. Jacob said that any disability must be, if the warriors could not defeat Jacob spiritually, it was because Jacob was only willing to yield if the man threatened to leave without the assurance of God's help. Jacob showed that he is ready to negotiate on the main issues. It is in the spiritual realm, not the physical realm. Demands and Jacob's insistence now favored him. His desire to go all the way, and the blessing manifested itself in the form of a name change, which meant a lot to Jacob, because his name had become synonymous with his character in the course of history. So the name change meant a change of character, a change in which the word was a way of exercising power over man. Jacob's acceptance of the change of name was tantamount to accepting the change of character. Perseverance brought him success. Faced with the people who were now responsible for success in the battle with God, God did not give up because God gave up, but because Jacob gave up. As was usual for God, the first had to lose in order to win. Be a last-ditch effort to maintain control, but throughout the episode, the fighter refuses to deny who this stranger really is, as the narrator called him Elohim. Elohim, at the end of the episode. The man hurt Jacob's hip, but he refused to let him go before the man blessed him. Jacob realized that he was not at war with men, but with God, and he would not give up until he was blessed. The place where the battle took place was called Peniel, which means face of God in Hebrew. Here is a lesson about Jacob's struggle with God. First, we need forgiveness, which can only come through God's grace. Jacob was responsible for what he did to Esau, and he knew it. Until now, Jacob had relied on his own wisdom to succeed, but now he did not know what would happen. His survival depends on his brother's forgiveness. Although Jacob could not control the hearts of his brothers, someone sinned, and Jacob was left alone to fight with him. Genesis 32:4. Jacob finally realized that he could no longer rely on his own strength. Especially when we chased him, the man saw that he could not beat him, so he touched Jacob's hip joint and hit him so hard that the hip bone was twisted. The man said to let me go because it was daylight, but Jacob answered and said, I will. Do not let me go unless you bless me. Genesis 32:25 and 26. Jacob had two admirable qualities, one of which was a spiritual sensitivity that was shown when he fled from his brothers and saw a ladder to heaven appear when he listens to the voice of the Lord told him to return to his homeland. His persistence is shown in his pursuit of Rachel, and his patience in serving Ran to win her heart, both of which are shown in his battle with the mysterious husband, Jacob. Even more powerful are the moral consequences faced by Jacob, who is not worthy of the blessing, but is willing to accept any judgment or the consequences that come with it. And the consequences that the struggle brings to him are no small thing. But Jacob received his blessing. The third is our identity in Christ. He told him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. He said, your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because you fight against God as a prince. Genesis 32:27 and 28. Jacob came from an interesting family. He was a descendant of those who multiplied in many nations with the faith of his grandfather. He inherited a little of his grandmother Sarah's jealousy, his mother's jealous cunning. Due to his sense of humor and loyalty to his father, he was named substitute at birth, and he lived up to it. In his early years, Jacob was a selfish man. Jacob is partly changed by his love for Rachel and his devotion to her family, but it is in his struggle with God that he reaches a turning point. He was baptized in Israel, the Prince of God. What does it mean to get a new name? Is this a new image in the entire Bible? God has done this countless times. Every new believer is treated like Jesus. If anyone he is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and all things have become new. 1 Corinthians 5:1-17. As we continue reading in Genesis, we see that Jacob's name continued to change throughout his life, from old to new. God reminded Jacob again of his new name in Genesis 3:5-10. This is something that happens to us all the time. God calls us his beloved, his new creation, but we forget who we are. We must hold on to our new identity. When we wrestle with God, we may make mistakes and forget who we are, but we can always come back to who God has called us to be. God wants us to know him better. Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. And he said, why do you ask my name, where he blessed him? Genesis 2:29. Jacob understood who he was and knew that God was the God of his father and grandfather, but the God with whom Jacob fought at the river, Jabbok, came in human form, and during the battle God became the God of Jacob's heart, but never really knew God. Understanding what God has done for others is different from understanding what he has done for you. God is more concerned with the state of our hearts than with our success in righteous living. Ways to build a relationship with him: Bible prayers and worship. Focusing on God with all our heart brings us closer to his presence. The biggest obstacle to spending time with God is sometimes ourselves. Our priorities are mixed. I know we start the day, use a time, God's word, and or prayer make the rest of the day go more smoothly. but my attitude changes because of God's peace with me and God's closeness, proud, self-sufficient and visionary. Jacob Malcolm Webb. Humility is specifically defined as freedom from pride or arrogance. In today's world, humility seems, but when we put aside our pride and trust Him, we become better people. God humbled many characters in the Bible, including Jacob. A similar story can be found in the conversion of Simon Peter and Saul to Paul. In fact, Paul later wrote a passage about his thorn in the flesh to prevent me from becoming self-righteous because of these extremely significant revelations. I had a thorn, a messenger of Satan, who came to torment me 3 times. I begged the Lord to take him away from me, but he told me that my grace is sufficient for you because my strength is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. Therefore, for Christ's sake, I love weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, because when I am weak, I am strong. 2 Corinthians 12:7-10. No one wants to spend their life with a disability or illness in order to remain humble, but God knows what we need and we depend on Him, not on ourselves. The sun rose when Jacob limped, and he got a new disease, but also a new identity, a new name, and a new acquaintance with God. It's beginning to look that way, and it's because He brings us more blessings when we struggle than when we don't. Remember, God is looking for Jacob for this battle, and when God shows up, Jacob is troubled. The approach of death squads and battle snaps Jacob out of his fearful trance and forces him to focus on God. I doubt Jacob originally wanted or even thought he needed this forced attention. I wouldn't be surprised if James asked from the start, "Oh God, can you get rid of this guy? This is exactly what I don't need right now." But he found the fight for the channel. God bless him. We can say the same. Keep fighting. What do you really need from God right now? Don't let Him go until God blesses him. When you have pain, fear, and uncertainty, God will meet you, but He may not meet in the way you expect or hope. Your greatest ally may become your adversary in the beginning, provoking you to fight with him. If so, Jacob, fighting will have countless benefits. You may not need comforting words. You may not need time to be alone with your thoughts. You do not need sleep. You don't need a healthy hip. You may need God's favor, is what you need when God calls you to join Him in prayer. His blessings are unwavering with Him. Don't give up. Don't let Him go while He blesses you. He loves to bless unwavering faith, and as a result, you will be changed today as we can be with Christ by professing our faith. Build relationships. Relationship, Jacob, is to be able to experience a new identity. Just like when we meet Christ, we experience a transformation. Everything changes, our life, our thoughts, our actions, etc. We can also learn from the story of James how people in the Bible struggled with God was not only physical problems and the desire to learn more about the Bible. The Christian faith is not blind, but based on the ways that God has provided for us in the past, with which we can struggle, but still gain the blessings of a new identity. Struggle to remember what God did in the fight with Jacob. You spent the whole night waiting for Esau to come. He felt fear and despair, but came out of the night with God's blessing, and renewed faith in God brings peace whenever we need it. Sometimes comes in unexpected packages and even unwanted packages that God will bring us limping if necessary to strengthen our faith. God weakens our faith in order to strengthen our faith when needed, causing Jacob's faith to depend more on God than on himself. Ultimately, Jacob's identity was changed by his struggle with God. He should no longer be regarded as having received blessings through deception. This time he was blessed by God because he overcame God by faith. This struggle turned out to be God's most gracious gift of restoration, similar to the gift Jesus gave to Peter. He denied his love for Jesus many times, so when they died, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" And he said yes to him. "Lord, you know that I love you," said to him, "Feed my sheep." And he said to him a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Feed my sheep." And said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" "You and I," said to him, "Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "God was pleased with Jacob's steadfast faith." Hebrews 11:6. When God calls us to wrestle with him, there is always more going on than we understand. God always uses it to change us and make us better. We celebrate wealth, strength, power, confidence, prestige, and modernity. Triumph, we despise and fear weakness, failure, and doubt, even as we admit it. Vulnerability, fear, disappointment are normal parts of life, and we often interpret them as signs of failure or even a lack of faith. We also know that most of us live in naive optimism and glowing praise of charisma and success, sources of dissatisfaction and despair in life. The great failure of the human soul will sooner or later face the cold reality of life. In the hands of God, we can easily recognize elements of our own struggles in Jacob's story. The fear of the dark, the loneliness, the vulnerability, the feeling of emptiness and helplessness, the exhaustion and constant pain, that even the Apostle Paul felt the courage and fear that we are concerned about. All our outer battles and our inner battles are fears, 2 Corinthians 7:5. But the truth is that God does not want to leave us in our trials, in the fears and struggles of life. In the conflicts of life, we learn that God has given us the appropriate divine gifts, and we can only do that, gain through it the power of return and transformation, and not only the gift of surrender, but freedom and endurance, faith and courage. In the end, Jacob did what we all have to do. He faced his mistakes, his weaknesses, his sins, and everything that had hurt him, and faced God. Jacob wrestled with God all night. Only after he reconciled with God, stopped fighting, and realized that he could not live without God, he received God's blessing. Genesis 32:29, this famous event in the LOR Jacob's life, teaches us that our lives are never easy, especially when we decide to fight alone with God and His will for our lives. We also learn that as Christians, despite our trials and tribulations, our efforts in this life are never without God's presence, and His blessings inevitably come with sometimes confusing and bewildering struggles. Real growth experiences are always accompanied by struggle and pain. Jacob's struggle with God at the river Jabbok, a dark night, reminds us of this truth. Even though we may be against God and His intentions for us, God as Christians is indeed very good, and we may wrestle with Him in the solitude of the night, but His blessings come at dawn. Genesis 33:1-12. Jacob looked up, and so Esau came with 400 men. Then he gave the children to Leah, Rachel, and 2 servants. He placed the handmaid and her children in front of Leah and her child, followed by Rachel and Joseph, and finally he himself went forward and bowed to the ground 7 times when he approached him. "Brother," but Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him, and he threw himself around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And then Esau looked up and saw the women and children who were with you, and he asked Jacob, answered and said that these are the children of the sons of his servants whom God had graciously given. Then the handmaids and their children came to worship. Then Leah and her children came to worship. And finally Joseph and Rachel also came and bowed. Esau asked me what was the purpose of these flocks and herds that I met, that I might gain his favor. He said, "Lord, my eyes." But Esau said, "It is enough for me, brother. Keep what is yours." "No," said Jacob, "if I find grace in your eyes, accept mine. As seeing the face of God, now that you have received me, accept the gift that has been given you. For God has been kind to me, and I have all that I need." And as Jacob insisted that Esau accept, so Esau said, "Let us go. I will accompany you." But Jacob said, "You know, my lord, that the children be gentle. I have to take care of the sheep and the milch cattle, because if they are led by force, one day all the sheep will die. So my lord goes before his servants, and I will slowly move the sheep. Before me and after the opposition of the children, until I came to my master who was a seer, Esau said, "Let me leave some men with you." And Jacob said, "What shall I do, that I may find favor in the eyes of my Lord?" So Esau returned to the sea that day, and Jacob, when he went north to Suoth, he built a house and shelter for his cattle. Hence the place is called Suoth shelter or tent. The plot of land where he pitched the tent, where he built the altar, and called it El-Elo, that is, Israel. His brother welcomed him with hugs and tears of joy. Esau is reunited with his brother Jacob. Esau does not want any of the possessions that Jacob gives him, although he accepts them at Jacob's request. He just wants to spend the rest of his time on good terms with Jacob's brothers. The story does not have a happy ending. He will eventually lose his beloved wife Rachel in childbirth, and his favorite son is sold into slavery after his brother betrays him, despite God. Having done everything, Jacob's life ended in a foreign land. His promises were true, though he did not know at the time how they were fulfilled. If you find this content valuable, I ask for your support by subscribing so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Together, we can inspire more ideas and expand our understanding. What parts of his story did you identify with when you read about Jacob's struggles? In what areas of life do you need to ask for forgiveness? Are you persistently pursuing your relationship with God? How can I approach him? By staying humble, we can grow, find more peace, and become the man or woman God has called us to be.